his voice to octaves higher than usual. She said no thanks. We're in the middle of a very important meeting about upholstery. The giant turned, his eyes narrowing into slits. You say something. Runt, you want to step outside and discuss upholstery? Jack's survival instinct, which was more developed than his bravery, kicked in immediately. I said, she's very grateful for the offer, but she's on a strict no-liquid diet. It's a medical miracle. If she drinks anything, she might evaporate. Very rare condition. The giant scoffed, muttered something about California weirdos, and walked away. The danger had passed, but the damage to Jack's ego was done. He felt like a coward. Jana and Chrissy tried to comfort him, but the sting of yellow stayed with him like a bad sunburn. The next day, Stanley Roper arrived with a toothache that made him even more irritable than a cornered badger. Apparently, he had encountered the same giant at the pub later that night. I stood up to him, Stanley bragged, despite his jaw being swollen to the size of a grapefruit, eyeball to navel. I told him to watch his mouth or I'd fix his plumbing for free. Stanley, he was trying not to laugh at you because he thought you were a mascot, Helen sighed. But fate, in its infinite irony, gave Jack a second chance. The giant returned to the Regal Beagle that evening, looking for someone to bother. Jack, fueled by a mixture of shame and a very small amount of courage and perhaps a bit of whiskey, stood up. You, Jack yelled, pointing a trembling finger. You owed these ladies an apology from last night. You were a creep, man. The giant loomed over him, a dark cloud of impending doom. Oh yeah, and what are you gonna do about it? Soldier, you gonna tell me about more medical miracles? Jack froze, but then he remembered a lie Larry had told the giant earlier in the evening about Jack having a steel plate in his head from a daring rescue mission in Vietnam. I'm gonna let you walk away, Jack said, his voice surprisingly steady, his eyes locked on the giant's. Because if I hit you, my doctor says the vibrations might crack the sidewalk and I'd have to pay for the repairs. I'm a man of peace, but I'm a man of very heavy peace. The giant, confused and genuinely intimidated by Jack's sudden, quiet intensity, actually muttered an apology and backed away. Jack, you were incredible, Chrissy cheered, throwing her arms around him. Jack leaned against the bar, his knees finally giving way. Wasn't I? I'm a hero, a cowardly, shaking, terrified hero who really needs to sit down now. Chapter 9, The Missing Rent. The final crisis of the month was a true classic, the missing rent money. $300, collected diligently over for weeks of scrimping and saving, kept in a plain white envelope on the kitchen shelf. It's gone, Jana whispered, her face pale as a ghost. Jack, the envelope is gone. The radio is still here, but the money has vanished into thin air. Burglars, Jack shouted, grabbing a rolling pin from the drawer. I knew we should have locked the door instead of just trusting the vibe of the building. They called the police. A weary detective arrived, looked at the lack of forced entry, and gave them a look that suggested he'd seen this show before. $300 in an envelope marked rent in an unlocked apartment in Santa Monica. You kids are either faking this for a rent strike, or you're the reason they put warning labels on shampoo. We're not faking it, Chrissy cried, her eyes wide with sincerity. We're just trusting. We believe in the goodness of people. The detective left, convinced it was an insurance scam. The roommates were in absolute despair. They were a month behind, and Stanley Roper was coming for the money at 6 o'clock, and he wasn't known for his leniency. We'll go to the pub, Jack suggested, already packing a small bag. We'll hide in the cellar. He can't evict us if he can't serve us the papers, right? That's not how the law works, Jack, Johnny groaned, burying her face in her hands. They tried everything. Jack even went to his college's financial aid office to ask for an emergency loan, spinning a heartbreaking tale about his 2-week, dependent, starving roommates. You live with 2 girls, the administrator asked, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. In the same unit. Together? It's the 70s. Man, Jack argued, trying to sound like a revolutionary. It's a lifestyle choice, a communal experiment in harmony. It's a no, I'm alone, the man replied, stamping a document. Your father makes $6,000 a year. In our eyes, you're an aristocrat. Go ask your butler for the rent. At 6 o'clock sharp, the door burst open. Stanley and Helen walked in, Stanley looking uncharacteristically triumphant. All right, nobody move, Stanley yelled, as if he were making a bust. I'm not here for the rent. You're not, Jack asked, clutching his suitcase like a shield. Are you here to tell us the building is being demolished? Because that would actually be a relief. No, I already took the money. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the shag carpet. What? Jonna asked, her voice trembling. Yesterday, Stanley explained, looking annoyed by their confusion. I came up to fix the sink, which, by the way, is still leaking. I saw the envelope marked rent, so I took it. You think I'm gonna leave cash lying around where any common crook could find it? I'm protecting you from yourselves. You didn't leave a receipt, Mr. Roper, Chrissy pointed out. We thought we were robbed. We had the police here. Jack almost hit a detective with a rolling pin. I did leave a receipt. It's right here in my book. Stanley fumbled with his pocket, pulling out a yellow carbon copy. See, received from 201, 300 bones. I'm a professional, even if you kids are amateurs. Helen rolled her eyes, leaning against the doorframe. He forgot to give you the copy because he was too busy peeping at the blonde in 107 through his binoculars. I was checking the migration patterns of the local seagulls. Stanley snapped. Jack, Johnny and Chrissy slumped